All right, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 28 of Into the Rift. I'm not your usual host. He is taking a break since he just got back from the Collegiate League in LA.
Collegiate.
Collegiate
You.
League. I knew I'd screw up somehow. And I'm
You're
also not
fine.
yourself, Kelsey Moser or Frost, who I both think they've hosted for us.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, joined by me, I'm not important, is Emily, our usual Brazil apologist, but today she's going to be your Easy Hoon apologist.
Yay!
Razzleplasm, who
Hey,
is Easy Hoon today because his
I
camera's not
am
working.
literally easy.
And we have John, who hasn't been with us for a while. How have you been?
Yeah, I'm good.
What you been up to?
What have I been up to? Uh, Scouring the depths of the analytical code and learning how to become a one true analyst in the LoL team, building up those contacts. But yeah, I actually just joined the team. I'm now with Pain Gaming in Brazil.
Cool. All right.
Woo.
So we're not going to be talking about every region this time because not everything was going on at the same time. So we're just going to jump right into the important stuff. So let's talk about the OGN finals. It was GE got 3-0'd by SKT. Why did GE flop? Who wants it?
Well, I'll go first. In terms of GE Tigers, like if you think about what the GE Tigers are good at, typically it's preparation, and we saw them kind of trying out a bunch of new stuff because they were using the latter part of the season to kind of work on their own flaws as a team, especially their early game, which teams like SKT, particularly Jin Air in the midseason, kind of really picked about their early game, and they were unable to kind of overcome GE in the mid to late game. But I do think that GE recognized in the season that they kind of had to work on that. And I think they definitely overcommitted to that in the finals. Like a lot of people will obviously point to the Aurelia pick and just be like, that's kind of wacky. Why did you pick that, GE? Like, Smeb didn't play that champion at all in the regular season. And I think that has a lot, it's kind of, to me, like, symbolizes their they paid too much attention to laning matchups and the laning phase when really a lot of their strengths are typically in like that mid to late game team fighting. And I feel like they definitely didn't showcase that. Like there were times when SK Telecom was really ahead of them
Mm-hmm.
significantly in gold, and they were still keeping up, like almost beating them in team fights. And so it was kind of like, why are you guys spending so much energy and so much resources into trying to get these like specific laning advantages? And I personally think that's kind of the key of why they faltered so hard.
Yeah, I could agree with that. It was a like the biggest I like the largest. Oh God, like the massive thing coming out of this series is how preparation wasn't a thing. You can't prepare for SKT. Um, you can prepare for maybe for the top lane, like obviously, bottom lane, but that's pretty much where it ends. And in all three matchups, because of course that Easy Hoon was the one who was playing, you saw LeBlanc bans when you would expect that. Well, GE was probably going into the set being like, okay, how are we going to deal with the LeBlanc in team comp wise or banning? And I think I believe they said that they were confident or like no faded in an interview.
Yeah,
Um,
No Fei
yeah, go.
basically said that CJ gave them like a really good blueprint for how to deal with it, and
Mhm.
that they were going to kind of take that and then make sure they didn't falter like CJ did.
Yeah, and they weren't ready. They weren't preparing. They weren't ready, but at the same time, I feel like they were too reliant on having to be really ready for their matches. Maybe overcompensating a bit for their lack of team play, honestly, in the early game. It's not there. So SKT is always the team that's pushing them first. It's in the bottom lane, in the mid lane. It always happens. And of course, honestly, we've heard the like how Kuro is the weak link of that team. Like it's always been the case that his laning phase hasn't always been stellar, but Th- This I don't know what to say, man. This is not the kind. This is a bit eye-opening.
So I have a follow up to that, or a question rather.
Mhm.
So you said it was really hard to prepare for them. Obviously, they have to prepare for two different mid laners and two different junglers, right? Do you think, for especially for viewers who don't maybe watch Korea as much, do you think that they have to prepare specifically for Faker Tom and then Faker Bengi and then also Izuhoon Tom then Izuhoon and Bengi? Do you think it's like extra depth in there or no?
Or not?
Mm, I guess. I mean, they would have to have done that, and it's something that they were adapting well in the sense that they were trading champions in the mid lane. It just wasn't working out because Kuro was just getting dumpstered. Just outright. That's just something you can't really plan for. It's actually just something you can. It just comes down to the player itself. And it reminds me of actually in China in which Etong went up against Rookie in the Vici versus IG matchup, and he just got dumpstered in every matchup. And you're like, okay, well that's I mean, it doesn't matter how much level of preparation you come into this matchup, you have to at least be decent enough to get out of the laning phase.
Do you think part of it had to do with the fact that they allocated so many resources to being in the top lane? Because I feel like I know we've spoken about this elsewhere, but I feel like they definitely really wanted to get that Aurelia ahead of the Gnar because that's the whole point. That's the whole reason why you pick Aurelia is to shut down the Gnar in lane. Like so you pick away like you get the Gnar so that Smeb doesn't play it, and then Smeb picks the Aurelia to try to counter it. But like it was weird because it didn't really fit into their team composition as well as like another champion would have, and then additionally they did allocate Lee to try to get that matchup like going, and I don't think they ever like they never were successful with that. Like I never saw Smeb coming out of the lane and just being like, yeah, like he's super super far ahead. That never happened.
To be fair, it feels like they were not going to be able to do much in the mid lane. Like first they had the Nunu Azir matchup. I mean, as in like the jungle mid lane synergy on the G Tigers. They had Nunu Azir and Azir Sion in game 3. You're not going to be able to do much with that. Maybe level 6, yeah, with Sion. With game 2, definitely. It's just really weird. Tom is a lot more aggressive, I feel like. Like it's not even an issue with Lee. It's just that like Tom and Easyhoon somehow have a much better synergy. And it's hard. I don't know. I don't it's difficult to really say if GE Tiger was worse off this set than usual, or if this was just teams surpassing them. Because I know CJ surpassed them.
Yeah, definitely. Like that series was a hell of a lot fucking better to watch than this one.
Hmm.
I think we actually watched this together on TeamSpeak, Baz.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
You would have heard my ranting.
Yeah.
Like this was not a Korean final. Probably the worst final in the OGN's history, I would say. I was just like bemused by a lot of the picks in the play by GE. I don't think they're very good. I mean, a lot of that could be down to yes, like everyone's citing that like since the Cinderhulk came in, like GE have just went down because they had this sort of a like scale into the late game, but they had the pressure in the lanes as well. And now they're just kind of like, oh well, we'll scale into the late game with this Azir, this Nunu, and he'll carry the game, but they don't do well in lane at all, and they flounder, you know. And looking at that, like it's interesting why they take the Aurelia counter into the Gnar, okay? Because if you're going to do that, right, Aurelia has a hard CC. So if you take a jungler with another hard CC, you're basically guaranteed kills in that lane all day. I don't see why they don't take, they take something that can follow up, so like a Rek'Sai or something with an additional CC, you know? Like, even though, like, yeah, Cinderhulk's really strong and it really helps out scale, if you're not going to play to that style anyway, if that's not your style, don't try and adjust to the meta, just stick to what works for you, you know? And if that's what works, then You know, that's what they should go by. But is that the players' fault? Is that the coaching staff's fault? You know, like I don't know. I've not heard much about GE. Obviously, they're new. I don't know who their coach is and what sort of experience they have in that department.
Well, their head coach is Nofe. He used to be the jungler for Najin White Shield, and he was known for being, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I recall, he was known for being a really intelligent player, and I believe was their shot caller for some time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was.
And throughout the season, I mean, like I think throughout the season, GE was known as this team who was really good at preparation and developing specific strategies for their opponents. And they were like, there was even a little bit of like back and forth between Coma and Nofe, which was kind of hilarious going to the finals because Coma just looked like he was gonna like leap across and punch him, but it was kind of great. But like Nofe was kind of like, well, I don't know about Coma, like he just lets the players decide, and like I don't know what's going on with his pick bans because Nofe looked better and GE looked better in the pick ban phase throughout the vast majority of the regular season. So I don't know if it was like a championship thing, or to me it just seems like they really overcommitted to trying to get their early game and their laning phase going, and to Raz's point and to your point, John, like they just like their mid lane faltered, and then they didn't use if you are going to pick Aurelia for a counter to Gnar, then you have to use it correctly.
And here's
But
the
the thing
thing.
is
Yeah, you go.
okay. Well, when you're looking at that, right? When you're looking to take a counter, like the pick that I always go back to, okay, when you look at lane counters and lane bullies, you always look back to Renekton, okay? Renekton was like the original lane bully, you know, in the top lane, and it was highlighted so much that if he was not slightly ahead the entire lane phase, he would be useless. And that's the way you kind of need to look at this sort of matchup, you know? When you're taking someone like Aurelia over a Gnar who's really heavy in team fights and you don't have like a disengage comp, a crazy disengage comp, then you need to have that Aurelia way far ahead to have the same impact later on in the fights, you know? And it's that same ideology you need to continue with the Renekton as such, that you have this hard CC, you have this lane bully. That's not always been Aurelia's forte, it's not been a thing, but that in this specific matchup, that is how it needs to go, you know? Split pushing isn't as viable anymore with the changes to the inhib turrets, like because they just do the laser now, kills the creeps a lot easier, you know, there's less time to dive. So split pushing, you know, she's not going to get an inhib. 1v1, she's not going to get an inhib. So you need to get her to a point where she can get the tower gold, the second tier tower gold, and then be some sort of a presence in fights, you know, be it skirmishes or whatever. But that just never happened, you know, they never got to that point.
Yeah. And I wanted to say that the thing with GE Tigers is initially when they came in with a lot of synergy. And the team was working because a lot of the teams in the league were not formed I wouldn't say properly, but like they were forming and they were in construction. There were a lot of questions on some teams like Najin, who
Oh my god.
had a lot of roster issues to say the least.
Najin, good lord.
But GE had their shit together immediately, and so they got the benefits. They got the treasure for all of like just for figuring everything out as soon as possible. But the thing with the big thing with a player dictated organization like this is that they won't be able to easily point out their own faults, or at least they won't be able to adapt as well to their problems as a team. So it's will they be able to make the necessary decisions? So like let's say next split will they come back stronger? Will they come back the same GE, like good enough to be able to make it to at the very least third place? Or will they just drop off because every other team just zooms right past them? It's hard to say. I think the team right now just needs to be able to figure out what they like everybody is gonna say the same thing, that the team needs to figure out what their flaws are, especially in the mid lane. Just need to figure out patches to what makes them a stronger team. Even looking at roster decisions, no one should really ever be um, should shy away from that. Should at least test it. But who knows? Maybe it was just a bad finals. I think it says a lot.
Okay, I think that's pretty fair. Another thing we're going to talk about is the 7-man roster. Um, because it's been a season-long experiment. Everyone's complaining about who's starting, who's on the bench, whether it's in the jungle or the mid lane. So how well do you think Koma, the head coach of SKT, uses a 7-man roster?
Really well.
Considering that we have a picture of Easyhoon instead of Razuko, I think that's the general opinion, I think.
I think the thing that, like, if I could, like, because I understand when people get upset that Faker is not playing. Like, I really do. I understand he is the best player. I understand that he is someone, not only, like, one of the best player that the game has seen, and on top of that, fans, they want to see Faker. Like, he's the best player, and so people want to see him, and I understand. But I think in order to kind of explore the rationale behind Koma's decisions, you have to step away from that thought process of looking at which mid laner is the best, and then actually take a step back and look at what those roster changes do to a team, especially one like the GE Tigers that, like, as we've spoken about, has really focused more on preparing for the other team than they have looking inwardly, aside from a few games at the end of the regular season. And so you have a team that really needs to prepare for all sorts of different looks that the other team gives you. Like, it changes the pick ban. It changes, like, Easyhoon draws the most mid bans just because people think that they can ban him out, and he has, like, really specific champions that he plays. And, like, Easyhoon has become a significantly better player than he used to be, but he's always kind of been, he has a very specific play style. And, like, I was joking about this while watching the finals, but it was kind of awesome to see Easyhoon, like, going ahead and, like, spitting in people's faces, Cassiopeia, like, actually being in front and kind of, like, being aggressive. Like, I've never seen Easyhoon play as aggressively as he did in that finals. And it's not even super aggressively. But I think in order to kind of explore how Koma used both mid laners, you do have to take into consideration what different looks the team, like, gets, and what they can do. Like, for example, I know we're going to probably cover this in our MSI section, but one of the reasons why I think he's probably taking Easyhoon and Faker over, like, along with Bengi, instead of having Tom be their sub, is because Easyhoon gives that kind of second roster. That's who changes what happens on that roster. So if you're trying to make it more difficult for other teams to prepare for you, then you do take Easyhoon, because it gives you a lot more options as a team in terms of strategy, and it gives your opponents a lot more to prepare for.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that, but this is like something we've never really had the experience in the West. Okay, like, this is why we can't really give insight from our team's point of views, because we've never had subs. We've never had the ability to use roster changes during the LCS, during playoffs. Like, this isn't a thing we've had the luxury of. So, like, I think for anyone that's not been in that dynamic, to come out and say this is fundamentally wrong, the best player should be playing, this is it, there's no, the strategic diversity doesn't matter, blah blah blah. Like, I think that's just fundamentally wrong. Like, unless you're in Korea and have experience with say, like, subs and on teams and whatever, then you can't really give a valid opinion,
Mm-hmm.
or argument. Even you can have an opinion, you can't give a good argument.
Yeah. With how I see it, I think SKT. It's easy to say they've done it the best because they've actually won with it, but they have like they've done the best with the sub roster, like which it's come down to, and we've seen examples like LGD, Najin, and Najin is probably the worst example of that, I
Yeah.
guess. Um, but
Oh.
LGD is a roster in which they've used it for. It's really difficult to say why they've used it. It's done well. I feel like whenever they use flame, it's like okay, we have a bit of leeway. We're gonna just put in flame, and it the reason why I don't understand it in that sense is because Flame and Acorn have the same champion pool. Legitimately, it's just exactly the same. And while people would say, well, Flame plays split push champions or so, and Acorn plays Rumble, that's just not the case anymore because Flame is like his most played champion is Rumble. In in solo queue and in the games, it's like in the professional games itself, they've actually kind of switched roles and how they play in what styles they've played, and so they literally both have the same experience in playing that style, and so it's kind of weird. Not sure. I know it brings a different dynamic to the teams and especially the comms, but SKT has done it the best in the sense that it changes their comms and it changes their entire style, I would say, just based off of Tom and Easy Hoon's play style. So like, yeah, it's really good. It's actually something. I remember coming into the split the moment teams started using rotating rosters, and I was like, this is not gonna work.
Yeah, I
I just
remember. I
thought,
think we talked about that one time
yeah.
because
We
we were
did.
worried about whether or not they would each roster or like combination of roster, whatever, would have enough synergy to actually be useful.
Hmm.
And it SKT was definitely shaky at the beginning because they were having cause,
Well,
like in between games, if you're switching gears from one roster to another, I imagine that can be a little tough to get used to. So
Hmm. It took a while, but I was wrong in the sense that I was just outwardly against it. It was like I was like, well, you're never gonna find the synergy, etc. It's a waste of time. You can just find the five best rosters and you can play them.
mhm.
But I think the way it was used perfectly well. I think that if that was a great blueprint for how to use that rotating roster.
when where SKT, like where the vast majority of their losses came was when in the beginning of the season, like not lost sets, but I'm just lost sets as well. But I'm just talking about like general losses. And there's a series from Najin to Samsung in the beginning of the season where they just pretty much like swapped every single game. So like Faker, Easy Hoon, Faker, Easy Hoon, Faker, Easy Hoon, like just down the line. And so I do think that if Koma deserves any sort of like he deserves a lot of credit, not if he deserves any sort of, but where he deserves the bulk of the credit is in circumventing that idea that you will disrupt the synergy of your team because you will. Like it's inevitable. And so if you go back and you look at the pattern of who they played, obviously Tom was played towards the end, towards the end of the season only. But if you're looking at the mid lane matchup, you see that he was going back and forth between Faker and EasyHoon, most likely, and this is just speculation, but looking at the statistics, most likely so that he could establish this is what happens when Faker's in the mid lane, this is what happens when EasyHoon's in the mid lane. Let's figure out our synergy now so that when we get to playoffs, we can just switch gears that easily.
Hmm.
And whereas you have a team like Najin, and I don't see the same like pattern or attention to detail in who they're swapping in and when and why.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I think we've kind of covered it already, but we wanted to specifically talk about the rise of the Easy Hoon. Do you guys think there needs to be anything else said about our praises and love for the Hoon?
Okay, here's my opinion. Okay, like
Oh, sure.
this whole thing in this series, right, with the whole Kuro and whatever. Look back to IEM, right? And if we're going to like say, oh, the 1v1 kills and whatever, they're like amazing, oh, he's so good now. Like there were European teams, you know, SK, whose mid laner was basically 1v1 and Kuro anyway in lane, and there were other teams that were performing just as well. You know, I think you can't put all the hype on EasyHoon through this series because I don't think G were that good. You know, like I don't think they were good enough to merit EasyHoon getting the praise that everyone seems to be giving him right now. I mean, it was good. He performed well, but just keep in mind that this GE Tigers was not the second best team in Korea. Look at the CGN this series. Was he doing the marvelous things in that series that he was in this one? I don't think so. Not
Yeah, he played just the first game, I think, and then they took him out for Faker.
There you go. You know,
I think that's a pretty fair point.
Yeah, that was a good point.
So,
and
just gotta wait
it's
until
actually
MSI?
the easiest. It's just the easiest matchup to really put him in against Kuro. It's literally, I look at the lineup of pretty much just about every Korean team, and Kuro is who you put him up against. I'm just not impressed with Kuro, and so how would I then hype up EasyHoon? EasyHoon's a really, really solid mid laner, don't get me wrong, but there will be people who'll be like, well, damn, man, EasyHoon, I guess we don't need that Faker guy anymore.
That best player in the game, set him aside, you know.
Yeah, I was like, all right, we're not having this
that's
discussion.
that. China, who's got the highest bid? Right, we'll just take that easy 2 million now. You know,
Just pick him out now, guys. He's on the market.
Alright,
Huh?
so out of curiosity then, where do you rank EasyHoon in mid laners in Korea? So Faker 1 is EasyHoon 2nd? Or do you rate someone else above him?
That's
I know
actually
GBM's in the fucking
difficult.
shoot.
Yeah, I was gonna say GBM. Like, I know Jinner totally.
They totally
like,
crapped the bud.
yeah, like so bad. That
was such a sad series to watch. I was really disappointed.
I was really sad. They were my other hope after KT didn't make playoffs, even though they looked awesome at the end of the season.
After they performed, I was like, they should have just put in subbed in the KT or else.
But Jinner, even though they were a disappointment, I think GBM really showed that he, like, even if you just look at him in the 1v1 matchup, his mechanics, his laning presence, like everything just took a step up this year. So I think it would be Faker, and then I actually, even though like I identified myself as the EasyHoon apologist or the EasyHoon fan, I actually, based on their performance this season, I would put GBM above EasyHoon.
Okay. What do you think, Raz and John?
Yeah, I would say that, and I would also put Coco, and yeah, I'd probably just put Coco above him as well.
Alright, that's pretty fair. I think I'd probably tie Coco and EasyHoon. Just in terms of recent performances or something like that. It's kind of hard just because I think they play differently. And I think they do how they do their style is really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think personally to rank. No, I'm gonna leave it at that. That's a whole different discussion. We'll get into that later. that's a whole other discussion. We're not getting into that right now.
If you get a game at MSI against a good mid laner, you know, like you've got the two best Western mid laners going to MSI, okay? So if EasyHoon is going to like leave an impression on the West, let's see him against the guys first, you know? Like, and that's actually a really good point that we'll probably go into later. But like, if he can outperform Bjergsen, then you can probably say, you know, this guy's one of the best. But and if he gets a chance, as you know.
One thing that is just in general, like throughout his career, not just now, but like throughout his career, Easy Hoon is really hard to rate as a mid laner just because of his play style is so passive. Like it's hard for him to get in trouble, but he also doesn't like he's not going to be that guy who goes in and like crushes lane either. He's just kind of going to be there and farming, and then like it's really hard to gank him because he's just so safe, and then they'll just like walk back as Karthus or Cassiopeia, or now he has the Azir, Xerath, like
He's like a
just kinda,
reinforced like catapult. He's
yeah,
got this
it's just
huge
kinda
shield
like,
and
okay,
just
like, I'll
flings
just
rocks at
walk
people.
back. Yeah, like I'll just walk back and keep farming. Like, it's not really like he doesn't make for the most exciting laner, and so it is really hard to evaluate him against other mids because he's not really like aside from like he had some pretty sick Cassiopeia play. But aside from that, like he's not really like a huge playmaker either. So it is really hard to compare him. Like thinking about the Coco Easy thing, it's like, well, they're completely different. So
he's like the control tower like of when he plays, right?
a bit.
Anyway, so that pretty much wraps up the Korea part of things. And then so with SKT locked in, we're moving into MSI. This is like the big topic of our show. And the team's going there for people who are forgetful or just aren't aware of all the regions. It's TSM, Fnatic, EDG, HQ, Bekistas. Am I saying that right? I'm not even going to try. Not even going to try, because I'm going to butcher it. And SKT. So, where do we want to start? Who's going to win?
Ooh, we're probably gonna have a split here. Yeah, he's gonna say SKT. What about you, Emily?
I would say SKT unless EDG shows that they, because I think it is possible for EDG to win. I think they're a very good team. Probably actually a better team than people are giving them credit for. If people did see the Chinese finals, you might look at them and be like, oh man, this is a team that totally crushed all season, and then look at how much trouble they're having in the finals. But I think that LGD definitely leveled up, and they played, first of all, they played very well. And for the most part, I mean, there's the obvious, choking at the end, but that has to be addressed if you're talking about LGD. But I think that EDG does have some significant weaknesses that they'd have to kind of shore up in order to beat SKT for sure. And then I don't see, unfortunately, any of the other teams coming. I don't see any of the other teams kind of surprising those two.
Yeah, I've been on the fence of this one. I've like looking at it face value. I've always been like, okay, this is pretty easy for I wouldn't say easy, but it feels like a SKT advantage. I'm more inclined to say EDG now. I feel like the competition that EDG has had to face has been a lot more demanding, I'd say. I feel like it's been a lot more apparent.
Isn't the schedule like a lot more demanding as well for Chinese teams?
Yeah, it is.
It's a lot more demanding,
Yeah.
So if anything, they've been desensitized to these massive, like, I wouldn't say massive, but like to these stadium matches. So going to Tallahassee, I don't think you're gonna have any LAN jitters. It's hard to say if SKT will if they put in Tom, but I think EDG's playstyle in general has been very teamfight centric, something that SKT has, but kind of not. They not to that level, not to that degree. And so the biggest issue, and I think this is going to be a massive comparison that's going to be made, is Coral versus Marin. And it's one of those things where if you look to the mid lane, you're going to see something. It's just going to be Pawn and whoever they decide they're going to play in the mid lane. And I think it's going to be pretty even up until that point. I think there will be skirmishes that come out of it in 2v2 situations. But for the most part, it's going to be dictated by the top lane, in which Koro has faced world-class top laners. He has, often, about like how many games by now in that region. And so for him, getting out of the laning phase, I don't think is going to be a problem. I think the problem is going to be how they convert whatever lead they get into team fights. I think it's going to be the question's going to be on Marin at that point. I think to be able to push Koro and to be able to utilize his advantage or whatever he can get in the top lane.
I agree with that completely. I think Marin, and like I was doing all these statistics on these two just randomly. I think Marin is a little bit more reliant on the laning phase in general, like getting an advantage in the laning phase just as a player, because I think you look at Koro and you look at his performance last year, and what happened? Like he lost lane a lot of the time, and so he kind of learned as a player to be able to do a lot more with less, I think. And then going into this season is really where you saw him kind of really come into his own and start actually dominating people in lane and stuff like that. So and then obviously that helps going into the mid and late game because he doesn't have to play from behind anymore. I definitely think that Koro is a lot better for his team in team fights than Marin is as well. Like I think Marin has a little bit more of that capability, especially if he gets a few ganks to kind of like crush lane. I think that's kind of always in him as a player. If you think about like it's not what SKT calls on him for sure. But if you think about the kind of player he was when he was first picked for SKTS and kind of what was expected of him, he was expected to be the carry and he was expected to kind of be a strong laner. And he technically, like, I think he does pretty well with advantages in lane. But I just think in terms of the overall team fight that SK Telecom has, and Marin's role, Marin is usually this season's really been used for utility, much like Koro has. I think Koro has a deeper champion pool. And I think Koro in team fights, he dictates the pace and the tempo of team fights along with Clearlove a lot better than Marin does. He has a lot more of an impact. Especially on the Gnar and the Maokai, which is something that they've both played a lot this past season. So.
And so Gnar is going to be a contested pick just from what Mar is starting to play. So then you're going to have questions on what Koro's like champion pool will be like there. But I think what it comes down to, I think Koro is overall for his team. I would say I think Koro is overall better than Marin. I think that Pawn will find his uses. You just have to give Pawn his champion, give him his casting, his talent,
his random blind picks his random
Fizz. Give him his champion, and I think he'll perform better. And of course, not only his champion, give him the jungle attention, and I think he'll overall perform better. And I think Clearlove is. God, yeah, I think Clearlove is much better than SKT's jungle. Like whoever they decide to put in the jungle, either works.
Either of them.
Yeah, and then you get bot lane, and it's literally Deft and Mako. So individually, in every role, I would favor EDG, unless of course if SKT just decides to play Faker every game, then you have a problem. That's about it. And I think
Pawn 1v1 killed Faker and Lean that one time. Don't you remember?
Oh my god.
I don't want I swear to God, if they use that as the narrative, I'm done.
They will.
They will. I know they will.
Remember, guys? Pawn solo killed Faker.
And I want to see that rematch, man. I just want to see Pawn versus Faker. That's all I want.
They're gonna hype it up as like this grudge match or something.
They
Just
will?
watch. They will. It's gonna be like the next boxing ring or whatever. I'm not
Something
looking forward to that.
that's worth noting as well about obviously with EDG is depth. You know, everyone's going to be looking at him. But actually, if you look at SKT now, Bang's actually performed really well in the past few series.
That's
Against
true.
CJ, I thought his Lucian play was excellent.
Bang had the game of his life. Yeah.
Bang was amazing
So
in that series.
if he can keep up that performance, then maybe the advantage that you thought EDG might have won't be as big, you know. So that's actually what I would be looking for, rather than just the mid lane matchup.
That's true. That's true.
As how those two impact the games, you know.
hmm So it's gonna be interesting just based off that. I think it's even. I want to edge out for EDG. Other than that, it's gonna be EDG, SKT. God, I'm just gonna start ranking these teams: Fnatic, TSM, HQ, and then Besiktas.
You'd put Fnatic
over
above.
TSM?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Why?
Here's the thing, like with Fnatic though, like their whole thing was based off Huni's TP plays. You know, like if any team is scouting, they're just going to abuse the fact that he can be baited into teleport plays so easily.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
any good team will create just say like this guy always looks to take that. I look at any game of Fanatics, any time there's an opportune time like to get a skirmish of whatever through teleport, he will go for it. It could be blind, like no vision in the area, whatever, one word. He'll TP there and he'll just go for it. Like you hear him on the comms, when they do that mic check, and he's like, "No guys, get me fed. I carry. That's the mentality this guy has, and it's you could abuse that so easily. And TSM are actually one of the teams where they're actually one of the only teams in the West where they actually have really good background staff who will be looking at these things and analysing this and turn around and saying to the team, look, this guy's he's an easy target, can we make something happen there? And then you look at Forbidden in the mid lane, this is a guy that really needs confidence, to play well. He's always respected the hierarchy as such. Even if you look at Zask FM and stuff now, he'll turn around and he'll say, "Oh, Nuke Duck's the best mid laner in Europe," even though he finished first and Nuke Duck went to relegations, which is quite absurd, So for him to come up against someone in Bjergsen who is rated really highly, then that respect level's going to be there. And if that puts the doubt in his mind already, then I think that game's lost.
That's true.
I rate TSM over Fnatic only because we already talked about Huni, right? They have the two analysts in the house. They have Lokadoko, and they're definitely going to be paying attention to Huni because he is the major playmaker, and his champion pull, as shown in the playoffs, is easily abusable. And he did well on Vlad. It's not like he didn't, right? But I just don't think he was abused enough. I think teams in MSI will definitely abuse the hell out of Huni's Vladimir. Unless if they somehow give him Hecarim, I'm just gonna I don't know what to say. But
what about Lee Sin? What about the Lee Sin?
I know.
oh god, please don't bring that Lee Sin.
They're going to bring out Forbidden's Yasuo and Huni's Lee Sin. You're not ready for it.
I will cry if any team loses to that multiple times. Okay, if that's the dominant strategy for Fnatic going forward, I'm done. I'm done watching MSI. But yeah,
I think the other thing to bring up about Fnatic in terms of what they are good at, obviously Huni teleport plays, but these kind of really small skirmishes, that are also easily abused by taking vision control. And additionally, if you try to do those same kind of skirmishes against a team that's just overall better at them, I would say definitely EDG. And then SK Telecom, I know we were previously talking about the Fnatic TSM matchup, but once you get into the upper echelon of teams that are there, they will start to basically realize that they can't just rely on out skirmishing people, which is kind of how they've been. In my opinion, that's kind of how they've been winning. They're best at skirmishing. So when push comes to shove, and when they're actually pushed and pushed and pushed, that's what they fall back on. And I think once they even honestly, even HQ can give them problems in that area because HQ is incredibly aggressive, and they also go for very aggressive skirmishes early. So I think if Fnatic is just going in and relying on that specifically, I think they're actually going to have not such a great time.
I think the most one matchup I'm looking forward to quite a bit is EDG versus Fnatic because
Okay.
Jesus, of course Fnatic will run their typical skirmish roaming style. You'll have like um, Yellow Star roaming around with his champion, etc., etc. And they'll try to make plays off of it. But I don't know if they're actually. I think they're ready, but I don't know if they're actually ready, man. I don't know. Like, I think they're gonna be quite surprised when they find out that they're gonna be outnumbered in almost every skirmish because EDG will always commit to every skirmish that comes on in the map. Like you will see the entire team, and you're like, "Whoa, I didn't expect
Where
them
did
out
they
there. What
come
the hell
from?"
happened? We just wanted to like add a
Suddenly,
numbers game, but we just got
yeah.
outnumbered."
Suddenly Koro, Mako, and Clear Love are all there
Yeah.
randomly. Like,
It's
what?
what do you do against that? It's just like they'll figure it out. I think Fnatic's um, Fnatic's thing has always been that they're kind of like been the most Chinese team in Europe. They've always been a team that's been really, I wouldn't say team fight. Yeah, I guess you can say team fight heavy. It's just like their roam squad and every etc. Like it's always been very similar to a Chinese team, but not really, not really. Like the all, yeah, you can't. I don't know how it's gonna go for them. It's actually gonna be pretty awkward.
Like a
that
toy
brings-
that was assembled in China but not really from China.
Yeah, yeah,
God.
yeah.
That kind of brings up one of our other points. What games do you think we should pay attention to? Like Raz already mentioned, Fnatic versus ADG, and any other games anyone here thinks is going to be really good. Recommend because there's going to be a lot. Thursday, Friday, 2 round robin days.
I guess the easiest one's Fnatic versus TSM. I think that one says everyone's gonna be
Probably
looking
just
for.
because of the whole
Yeah.
third place match.
Yeah.
NA versus EU hype.
There's no at this point in time. What else are we gonna call it? Like it's the third place title,
It is. Oh yeah. For
unless
sure.
we get proved otherwise. And TSM winning IM was one thing, but this is the real deal.
Hey
This is
man,
the real title for first.
they beat the best team out there. They beat World Elite.
Pro the lead. They did beat the best jungler in the world.
That's
So-
true. They did
So,
beat Spirit.
like seriously, give them credit for that.
Yeah, they really they piled on with the numbers game there.
Yeah, like you ban out Spirit and then you get those deep wards down, and then
The ultimate
then-
5v1.
But again,
yeah.
that comes back to like the whole thing that we like I just brought up with the background stuff. You know, that's TSM's real weapon going into this. I think they do have some of the best staff going there. I don't know them personally, but from the results at least, you know, they seem really prepared and they definitely will come in with a game plan. I don't think if you look at the lanes and how teams stack up that way, that on paper they will look as if they can win, but you know they can pull something out. I'll be expecting TSM to pull something out and put up a challenge against these teams.
I think in terms of staff, TSM is definitely behind EDG and SKT, but out of the other teams that are there, yeah, definitely. And I also I am morbidly curious to see how AHQ stands up against some of these teams, just because they did make a significant roster change that ended up kind of carrying them through their playoffs. And it's weird because they're a momentum team, but they're not technically a momentum team because they haven't played in forever. So it's not like a team that has a ton of momentum because they just won like a series of games. There's been this weird like cooling off period. But I am curious to see how people will kind of deal with their really early aggressive style. I mean, I don't think it'll work against like EDG or SKT, but I'm talking about like I'd like to see the Fnatic AHQ matchup because I think they kind of want to do similar things, but I actually think that from watching HQ, they commit even more to that. So, like I know that's probably not a matchup that a lot of people are like, "Whoa, it's gonna be awesome." But like, I am very curious to see how those two teams kind of stack up against each other.
Mhm.
It's quite worrying actually for Europe. Like that's a possibility. Like there is nothing to gain here for Fnatic, right? Unless a miracle happens, they're not going to beat EDG. They're not going to beat SKT. TSM are most likely going to beat them, but there is a possibility that they lose to AHQ. You know,
Yeah.
and that is really worrying for Europe. And I said it last week. I said this is probably the first international tournament I've been like going to watch for League of Legends that I'm really scared for Europe. You know, I don't think they're going to do well at all.
Well, I think Fnatic really, the reason why they did so well in Europe is kind of because their playstyle was so different than other teams. But I think when you get to an international level, that playstyle, again, it's just what they're good at. There are other teams there that are a lot better.
The fact that UOL made it to the final really highlighted that the Europe's in deep shit right now. Like it's really terrible. Like elements are like the old guard as such, right? They still need to find their dynamic and they're making changes and whatever, right? Okay, Roccat really underperformed. They were shit, and then you had SK Gaming, who now like all this stuff's blown up about that they had internal problems. They didn't have a coach. They didn't do this and that. They had no real strategic input from analysts, you know. So there's all the big teams in Europe that would be pushing for this final were having major issues, and now Fnatic have came out on top. Yay, brilliant! But on the international stage, Europe is in tatters. You know.
Mm-hmm.
H2K, my only hope.
Well, they done really well, obviously, but I don't think they'll go to Worlds. No, I don't think they'll be top three, or well, not even top three. I don't think they'll win the gauntlet. I don't think they'll win the summer split, and I don't think they'll be second in points or top in points or whatever it is they need to be. But they are good. They were Europe's shining hope this split, I guess. But it doesn't make up for the lackluster performances of other teams, you know. Like,
Okay, so we pretty much agree that EDG and SKT are just going to hit the ground running, right? But I think an interesting question we'll have to ask ourselves again when MSI is over is that whatever the results are, do you think the Western regions are slowly catching up to Korea and China? If so, why? If not, why? Or do you think it's just not like enough of an indicator, just playing one team from each region?
I mean, I think for I think for Korea, it's easy to say that. I think it's one of those situations in which, because Korea kind of injured themselves, not really to like, can't really say much about it, mostly because they lost so much talent. Not even just so much talent. They've lost so much. Yeah, it's not even so much talent. My cat is going crazy.
Zeely reading Twitch chat.
I want to read it. Okay, I'll read it. Oh my god, the cat's alright.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not even just like the team itself has like the teams in Korea are just rebuilding in terms of like trying to rebuild whatever synergy they have. So now is the best time for NA and EU teams to really capitalize, but I don't think they will. I think it's SKT. Like that team's been around for the longest time. And so first place. I don't know. Or second.
Okay.
Yeah.
is the cat dying or what? What's happened to it?
I don't know, man.
Is Michu okay?
Yeah, I
They
think
need to get your cat a webcam that needs to come into the Rifts Rise cat cam. You know, that would
Is she
set
too
up.
busy practicing with her new CS:GO team or something? Well,
No.
I think the big thing.
for those unaware, there's a CS:GO player named Michu with the same name as Razel's cat.
That's true. To be fair, I would have rather had that cat named Travis Catford, but that's just another
We
issue
came up with that
altogether.
like way later though,
Yeah, that's true. I
and
would have. I
I
would
can't not say Travis Cutford anymore. But
have.
that's digression. That's.
Yeah, let's move on.
I was gonna say, like, to Raz's point, he kind of like conveniently changed the subject from NAEU versus Korea and China, Korea and China. But I think that's the bigger story for me. I think having lost this much talent, how does Korea, how do Korea and China stack up to each other?
Right.
So that's more what I'm interested in, to be honest, than NA versus EU. I think that's the bigger story because I think that's had like a really significant impact on Korea, who is indubitably the best region for the past 2 years. So that I mean that's what I'm really curious about, and that's why I can't say like because I think honestly, if EDG plays at their best, I think they can beat SKT. Like I definitely think it's a possibility. So I really, really want to see those two teams make it to the finals.
I think I would agree with that. Like, I'm pretty curious how hard the migration hit Korea, but I think I'm pretty confident in saying that Korea will not be hurt in the long run. Just like right now, you'll see the effects, right, when they go against each other. But in the long run, I don't think it's gonna change too much. Other than that, is there anything else you guys think is important to talk about MSI?
Like, just as you're discussing that there, right? Let's look at why they've not been. I mean, all their talent, all the main talent was taken away from the region. Okay.
Sure.
Now, if you look at NA and EU and whatever. Okay, these regions are important. You know, more so than before. Now, what does Korea have that these regions don't? You know, is it just that they've got all this marvelous talent just sitting there that comes up through Challenger, and they're just amazing. They just hop straight into the professional scene, and they're the best players. You know, what is it that is making this, you know, not so hard on Korea? Why are they still rated the number one in the world? Why, like, and it all comes down to structure. You know, something that these teams don't have. You know, you look right now at NA and EU, and almost every team that didn't win the league or come second is making changes. And it's not just roster changes, it's staff changes where coaches are getting blamed and they're getting replaced. And there isn't a proper hierarchy as such in the Western regions for staff, you know, and until that changes, until we adapt to that, you know, then I don't think we'll ever close the gap as such, you know, because we're years behind. If NA took all of Europe's talent from it right now, do you think Europe would ever recover the way that Korea has?
No. Actually, that's a really, really good point. I don't think so, because I think you can look at Korea now and you can say, like, okay, they did have kind of a lot of teams had a rough season. You had teams like Najin that were really struggling to even use the talent that they did have effectively. But then I think the team that figured it out first is definitely coming out and won the split and now is going to MSI. And I think that's definitely due to like who did we talk about for the first part of this thing? It was Koma. We talked about Koma and how like what he actually did right. And obviously he has an entire like SKT as ridiculous staff. So I mean, you can't always point to staff. I know Samsung did lose a lot of their staff, but they kept some of it, and their teams did not look that great over the course of the season. But that is a really good point. Would Europe recover?
No, they're not even making use. They're not making use of the talent they have right now. Look at all the teams that underperformed this season. You know, that's what it comes down to. And why is it? Because organisations don't structure themselves properly, and you know, until until that happens, it's always going to be the scapegoat. It's always going to be, well, you see, our teams, we didn't really have the structure in place to make sure that we had the best resources, So why didn't you say to your organisation, look, we need analysts, we need a proper coach, a coach that can control the team. He actually has a say on who plays and who doesn't play. He can sub me out. He can sub the star player out, the faker, the best player in the world. He can sub him out and bring in this other guy that's got like a completely different style. And that team that's doing that is winning the best league in the world, or arguably the best league in the world for the duration of League of Legends. So when it comes down to it, are we going to ever see these changes? I highly doubt it. But this is why it's so blatantly obvious, And like this year, where Korea got raided, and it's taken this long for SKT to really shine. This was a real season for Europe to come up and say, we're here to contend. We can come to MSI and we can put up a challenge. But instead, we're looking at TSM, a North American team, who have imports from Europe, 2 imports from Europe. They're looking to be the real contenders, and it makes you scratch your head, If we've got this region full of talent, that's going to America and doing really well, why aren't our teams competing as well as what we think TSM will?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's pretty fair. Really want Western regions to really up their infrastructure, because it's 5 years now since the beginning of esports.
Sorry, that was a bit of a rant, by the way.
No,
I mean, I know it's going to take a
really
while,
good
but
point.
like, come on.
Well, and also, like, what did we talk about to what TSM has over, like, other NA teams? And then
TSM's
additionally
infrastructure is
going into
superior
this,
to the
like,
rest of NA.
yeah, they actually have, like, analysts and a coach and, even though I honestly, like, personally last year when they brought on Lokodoko, like, I did have my doubts in terms of, is he just going to be, like, a friend to the players or whatever? But it really, really seems like TSM, like, they figured out, okay, we want to win, so what do we have to do to win? We have to have a coach that will actually tell the players, like, no, you can't do this. And then we have to have, like, I think they have 2 analysts, don't they? They have Dylan and they have Parth.
Parth.
Yeah, and like I know Parth vaguely because I've edited his writing. He's incredibly smart. And so like I know that they seem to have that right mindset where they're like, okay, we need to have people that the players will listen to, and then additionally we need to have multiple people giving input on like the actual games. So not only scouting opponents, but then obviously addressing what in the team they can fix as well. So, I mean, and other NA teams don't really. I mean, like you talk about Europe, but I don't really think other NA teams seem to be quite there either.
Yeah, I don't care about any. It's just because TSM is obviously from NA, and I'm sort of putting them on a pedestal here, but rightfully so. They're a prime example of a team, who actually, you look at TSM and their history, they're not the most recognised team that would make the right decisions because their owner is constantly ridiculed by people and made terrible PR decisions with flaming and whatever else. But this is the team that has set the right infrastructure and has went about it the right way to develop a team into something that could, albeit, slim chances, but could contend on an international stage. Mm-hmm. And we've not seen that for a long, long time in the West.
Yeah, I mean, TSM since the early days, like Reggie, for whatever you want to think of him, I know he's not a perfect person, whatever, but like he has molded TSM since the beginning to be the team that they are today, even though he hasn't been the coach this season or last season, right? I mean, he was the authoritative figure. I mean, obviously because he owned the team, right? But he made sure they fell in line. He made sure that they practiced scrim. Like, they lived in New York just so they could scrim EU teams back in Season 2 and get as much practice as possible they could. I know that they scrimmed Zubu Frost way back in the day, like way back when they first started. I remember that because I was at Worlds and then Woong said, the translator for Woong said he wanted to thank TSM for helping them set up scrims in the early days, so I just assumed they scrimmed. That's an assumption on my part, but not the point. But like, you need players with the right mindset to follow the infrastructure as well. And TSM's players have always understood that you need to follow one singular person. Like, obviously, for good or for worse, they're gonna have to follow one singular mind, right?
But that
And
comes
respect
from the
the- respect
organisation
authority.
itself. That comes from the organisation itself, okay?
Yeah.
When we look at coaches and these big teams, you look at EDG, you look at SKT, these guys are indispensable, okay? These are the guys that make the decisions. Now you come to Europe, for example, and you look at the coaches. Look at Sheepy in UOL, right? This guy has zero input apparently onto what they play. These players dictate what they play and they play whatever the fuck they want. Would he have a voice in if he wanted to replace a player, bench a player? I highly doubt it. I highly, highly doubt it. You look at any team in Europe, they were just a good example. Look at Fnatic, maybe the Stellar guy, okay? Now, I think he's a bit better. I think he's obviously screwed on and he knows what he wants, but does he have the power to turn around and bench Hooney to bench Forbidden if they're acting up? I don't know. I think these players have more power than the coaches in these positions, and that's the main problem, is that they're not scared. They're not scared of losing their position. They're not scared of the coach. What can the coach do? He's just a guy here to give me, input on my gameplay or to make me a breakfast in the morning. That's all they see this guy as, and it's not correct. It's not the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think you're.
Can you see Coma going and making breakfast for the guys in the morning and being like, "Oh, hey guys, here's your shoes. I've got your shoes laid out. You're all ready for school. Yeah, your bag's ready. Done your homework? Yeah. Oh, great guys. Well done."
Well, they did have that video of like him, like feeding Wolf and Bang and like brushing Marin's teeth or whatever.
Yeah,
That was pretty hilarious. But I don't think that's actually what happens. Like, I think the best test, and like it came up in a couple of the arguments I got into over the past few days about the Easy and Faker thing. But like, there's no greater testament to how powerful your coaching staff is if they can tell the best player in the world that he's not going to be playing in the finals of his region, and have that be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a statement. That is a bold statement as well. That should really ring home for a lot of organisations out there. You look at any other sport in the world. You look at soccer, as you guys call it, it's football for me, where the manager is the figurehead. He's the guy that makes the decisions. He makes the decisions on the tactics that are played. He makes the decisions on what team plays, which players play, who he signs, who he sells. These are responsibilities that should be delegated to the staff. I'm not saying it all needs to go to one guy, right? Maybe it doesn't need to go to one person, but you can have multiple people in the backroom staff that have these responsibilities,
Yep, that's fair. I think we pretty much covered everything. So, to sum up, SKT is going to win. EDG has a chance of winning. And then we think that TSM is going to take the third place belt. Yes? Yeah. Other than that, I think that's pretty much where we're going to wrap up for the night. It was not too much of an eventful week. Any shoutouts you guys want to do?
Shout out to Easy Hoon.
Yes. Shout out to the Hoon Club.
I'll do a shout out to my new team, Pain. I'll give them a follow. Pain Gaming.
Yeah.
Get into the Brazilian scene, guys.
The Brazilians.
Oh my god. We literally have like the corner market.
Oh god. The Brazilians are taking over.
Raz, any shoutouts?
Yeah, shout out to the Chiefs. Teammate spotted. Pow.
Aha, okay. So anyway, so that's been it. I've been your host. Hopefully I did an okay job in Daniel's absence, but the VOD will be up as soon as we can get it, and thanks to all of you guys for being here. It wasn't too much of a long show, and thanks for the viewers for tuning in. And shout out to Razzle's cat.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Our mystery guest.
Good night.